Hi. So thanks everybody for coming to the next portion of our career series. And I guess without further ado, we have Jen Amos and Nani Dominguez here, who are the co-hosts of the Filipino American Women Project, which is amazing. If there's anyone on here who hasn't listened to it yet, highly recommend. As a Filipino woman myself, I discovered this almost a year ago in quarantine. And it was so nice to find this virtual community that Nani and Jen started. There were so many stories that were told, and I found myself in so many pieces of these women. And Vanessa and I figured, for what better time than Women's History Month to have Jen and Nani talk to us about why they created this, how they do it, all that goes into it. And I'll stop talking now. I will throw it to Jen and Nani. So without further ado.
Oh man. Okay. The pressure. Here we go. Hey everyone. It's so great to be here. Thank you all for taking time out of your Saturday to just hang out with us. I know that we have some listeners on here from our show, so thank you for just coming out to support. I guess I'll start first since I started the show. So a little bit about the Filipino American Women Project. It started back in around December 2016. And it was at a time where I was kind of starting to transition out of the business I had at the time. And I was trying to look for something. And another backstory to that is at that point in my life, I think I was in my mid 20s. I'm 33 now, was that 26, 27 or something? But around that time, I was constantly in and out of the Filipino community. I don't know if some of you can relate, but you put your heart into it and then you get burned. And then you have to kind of go away and lick your own wounds and you try to go in again. And, it's like this weird abusive relationship that I had with the Filipino community. And I have a whole story about it for another time. I mean, I started off in middle school being bullied by Filipino American women. I did grow up with a very just abusive environment in my own family after I lost my dad at 10. So I just had a very, very conflicting relationship with being Filipino. So it was about, I think, late 20s, 26, 27, when I said enough. I'm tired of hating who I am. And I thought that I could find, some validation or approval through joining other nonprofits or organizations and what have you. And what I had come to realize is that I needed to create something for myself. I don't know whose quote this is, but I know that Crystal Fabella from Filipina on the Rise mentioned this on our show when she was on. There's a quote that goes, "Find a hole in the world in the shape of you and fill it." And so I realized in order for me to really love who I was, I had to create something that really felt like me. And so that's how the Filipino American Women Project was born. I remember doing a Google search at the time, December 2016, just looking up Filipino American women. And I'm sure a lot of you would know that if you Google us, there's not a lot of positive things to find, not a lot of positive things at all. And so I took that as a sense of responsibility to be the change that I want to see. And so the Filipino American Women Project, or TIFA Project for short, we call it, started via Facebook Live because I had a social media marketing agency at the time. And Facebook Live was starting to become the rage. Whether you liked it or not, you would get notified whenever someone was on Facebook Live. And so I took that as an opportunity to, capitalize off of that. And then in 2000, I think, when was that? 2018. That's when I went on a hiatus because my husband and I moved from San Diego to the East Coast, first Richmond, Virginia, and then now currently we're in Virginia Beach. And I really had to reinvent myself. I was 30, basically starting over. I left my business behind, my friends, my family, my reputation. And I was telling myself this narrative that I was living under my husband's shadow because I primarily had moved out here to work with his business. And as I was trying to figure myself out, I was kind of just working internally with him. So it was in summer 2019. Wow, so many things happened in the summertime. I just realized I met my husband during summertime. Wow, that's so many things happen in the summertime for me. But anyway, I'm just thinking out loud. So anyway, I remember in summer 2019, we had moved again. So I mentioned from Richmond, we were there for 7 months and then we moved to Virginia Beach when I started feeling extremely lonely. I mean, I had already felt lonely. Like it was already hard enough to try to make friends out here. And then when we moved a second time, I kind of came to this conclusion that the way for me to make friends is through podcasting. And luckily when 2020 hit, I was already prepared for podcasting because I was already practicing and stuff and people were, at home and what have you. But within that year, was when I met Nani. So I started the show, I think summer, fall 2019. And I think it was about 6 episodes in when Nani heard our podcast. So Nani, I'm going to hand it off to you to, share your story and how you came onto the show.
Yeah, I was going through this kind of weird identity crisis that I still, for some reason, have a hard time articulating, but it was just a series of destabilizing events that had happened in my life, like losing my job, bad breakup, a lot of drama going on with my family that was kind of breaking us apart. And I kind of just felt like I needed to explore what it meant to be Filipino on my own, because I didn't really grow up in a Filipino community. All I really had was my family, which is huge. I come from a big family, and that's really informed how I identify. But I was like, oh, okay, what does this mean, without their guidance and direction? And so I had just done similar searches, like Jen said, on Google, just about Filipino American women to see what's out there about us, or what can I connect to, on my own. What connections can I find on my own? And like she said, there's not a lot of positive things that pop up. And I just wasn't resonating with, all the vixen girls in bathing suits that pop up, or mail order bride websites that seem like they're going to give your computer a bunch of viruses. And so I went to Instagram and did a search there. And of course, the podcast page popped up because of the name. And I started listening to the podcast. I think Jen had only put out 3 or 4 episodes at that time. But even just off of that strength, I felt the need to DM her and just say, hey, I do not want to be on this show. I don't want to talk about my story, but I want to somehow help with the production of it. I want to help make this project happen and see what I could contribute. And I had no idea in what context or what that would mean. But she just responded and said, okay, let's jump on a call tomorrow. And we ended up talking for 2 or 3 hours about God knows what, just a bunch of personal stuff. And it felt kind of like a therapy session to me. And she was instantly kind of like my ate from that moment. And so she had ended the call with, why don't you just come on and co-host with me? And I was like, oh, okay, that's easy. I can talk to other people about their stories. I just don't want to share mine. And I think I had said in the first episode, I don't have any life lessons to give. I'm the one that needs all the life lessons. And so in a way, that was just such a rewarding experience or opportunity for me to get to have and participate in. So yeah, anyway, that's how I came along. And here we are, almost 100 episodes later, 3 seasons in. I have learned a lot. It's been really therapeutic for me. It's reframed a lot of how I think, not just about the world and the community that I participate in, but also my, individual path and kind of how I've grown as a professional and how I've built skills outside of my kind of 9-to-5 job, which I've always felt stuck to or glued to because of the security that it comes with, but that doesn't really fulfill me. And, I know it's not what I'm destined to do. So it's just been rewarding in so many ways than just one. And not to mention, the community that we've built behind it, which is really everything, and the engagement that we get from you guys. So yeah, I don't know how to put it into words, how grateful I am to have found this project and to have gotten to Jen first, because I know there were a lot of people that also reached out to her in the same way, hey, what could you use me for? These are my skills, blah, blah, blah. And, now we have a team of interns that we work with at the Bulosan Center from UC Davis, who are amazing. But I know that there's just a lot of people that would like to be involved in something like this and sometimes just don't know how to ask. So I feel really grateful to have had that opportunity and to be here today.
That's awesome. So both of you kind of talked about just this disconnect that you had from the Filipino community. And I guess 100 episodes later, how does that feel for you guys now?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. This is usually when I hand it off to Nani. Nani, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. I mean, I think that disconnect that we all feel, whether we start out with it or whether we have a bad experience in the community that makes us feel disconnected, is it always comes back to that, oh, I'm not blank enough to fit in here. What I've really learned through the show and through hearing all the stories that the Pinays have shared with us so far is that we find commonality in that experience of not feeling something enough or not feeling like we belong or deserve to belong to this community. And that's what binds us together. And it's like the fact that we have never had this open space or like safe container to have these conversations and talk about this kind of stuff. We'd never know that, but having this kind of like virtual living room space where we can have intimate conversations and talk about things that we would typically only talk about in private with like our closest friends or family members or therapists or whatever is really eye-opening for a lot of us. And it makes me feel like, oh yeah, I do belong here. And even if it is, a turbulent experience, like we're all in this together. We're all literally feeling the same thing. Our pain, our happiness, our collective is one. So we just have to start acting like it.
Yeah. To piggyback off of what you said, Nani, which was beautifully said. This is why Nani's my co-host, because he just has this way with words. There's a book I've come to love called The Upward Spiral by Alex Korb. And I feel like I bring it up like all the time now, but it's a book about depression. How do you work on your depression? And a couple of years ago, I was diagnosed with mild depression. And, naturally I was in denial of it. And then when they issued antidepressants, I never picked them up. I was all like, no, I'm going to figure out how to work on this depression by myself first. So fortunately, I had this book, Upward Spiral, and there's a chapter in there that really, really, really resonated with me about the importance of community and how it's just overall good for your mental health. I mean, especially in a time right now, a lot of us feel disconnected. Even right now, even for myself right now on a personal level, like I've been feeling really disconnected lately. Like even though I've lived in Virginia Beach for about 2 years now, I've been wanting to desperately, make, like Nani knows this, and I bring this a lot on our show, that like, I just wish I had friends where I could just crash in their house and I can come unannounced, I can just come and raid their fridge or something. It's like, I haven't had something like that since San Diego, which was almost like over 3 years ago now when I lived there. And it's something that I've been really hungry for. But the beauty of having something like the TIFA project is it holds me accountable to be in community. It holds me accountable to stay connected. And I don't think we could ever eradicate, disconnect. I think it's going to naturally come, like the way we feel connected or disconnected is going to have its ebbs and flows. But the way to prevent it or to work through it is to be in community. It's like, there was also another phrase I heard somewhere, like we are inherently built for community and connection. And so the thing is though, I think, I myself coming up from, a really like a toxic background with my family, unfortunately, sometimes community can be abusive. And so I know we have a listener on here, I won't call them out, but, they almost see family as a negative connotation because of how they've been treated. And so what I have found in the TIFA project is, community, family, connection, it's what you make of it. And it's just like love. Like love is not something you're entitled to. It's something you work on. Love is a verb. And so really all of this is just an act of constantly working on building connection intentionally. It's just like you're not going to shower once and then smell good forever, right? Like you got to do it consistently. If you want to stay fit, you got to work out consistently, right? Same thing with community and disconnect. If you don't want to feel disconnected, you have to constantly work at feeling connected. And so even despite how I'm feeling, nowadays, especially in the recent days where it's been hard for me to kind of wish so deeply that I had deep connection out here, at least I found a way anyway through something such as this. So it's a practice. I think really just to answer your question, Caroline, it's like that disconnect I've come to learn is a practice. Like if you don't find it in one place, like if you don't find it in your own family, you learn to find it in friends, you learn to find it in volunteering, you learn to find it in starting a podcast, So anyway, yeah, that's my answer to your question.
I love that. And I have like so many follow-up questions to that, but no, I think the both of you, that's definitely what you have created to this community. So I went to school for nursing and I'm 1000% not a nurse. I work in sports media. And I remember going through all of that and just like the process of it and the negativity that came with it. I felt like a bad Filipina for abandoning nursing, right? And then you two had a guest on, I think her name is Alyssa.
Yep.
About how she said, no, I'm not doing bedside. I'm not doing nursing. And I was just like, it's not just me. it was so nice to just hear somebody else say, no, that wasn't for me. And I walked away from it too. And I think the community that you two have built has only helped expand our community even bigger. And I think that's really awesome. And I'd be curious to hear if there's any other like similar stories you two have heard from your listeners, if you're okay with sharing it.
Oh my gosh, there's like a million stories.
Yeah.
Well, I answered the question last. So Nani.
No, I mean, I was just going to say the same thing that you just said, which is I think we've had a handful, if not 2 or 3 handfuls of people that have come on with stories like that. And it's really, again, the common theme that I find in their stories is this repetition of like trial and error. And it's like we start out trying to uphold our parents or our grandparents or whoever's expectations of us, our family's expectations of us, or our culture's expectations of us, wherever those influences come from. And we kind of burn ourselves out and run ourselves dry, realizing like, oh, this is not my path, like this is not what I want to do. This is not what makes me happy. And it's because we've been taught that, again, to find security in a job and to find longevity, somewhere you can stay and get benefits and a 401k and health insurance and all of that for a long time, when it's like, if we were encouraged to do what Jen has done, is start a path of entrepreneurship and, look further into our own interests and passions, we could find something that's fulfilling. And it's like, what do you value more? So I think a lot of us just have to learn that the hard way, unfortunately, because we've been wired to uphold those expectations again. And it's hard to make that switch of, letting down your family or making them proud versus making yourself proud.
Yeah, beautifully said. I think to add upon that, I think about like friends, exes, where they're so close to their family. And it was so important that, I got close to their family. And I mentioned this because of course we care about what our family thinks of us because it makes us feel safe. Like we want to feel safe. We want to feel accepted.
Yes.
And when we step out of that, it's a risk. Like it's a huge risk. Like you almost feel like you're facing death. It's like a lot of us, I think, tend to struggle with like, can I be myself, but at the expense of losing my family? Like I'll share with you all, like having the upbringing that I did have, especially after losing my dad, like I felt like I didn't have like a male figure in my life and amongst my relatives to protect me for a lot of things that I had faced growing up. And so I had learned to eventually venture out on my own. And I'm proud. Like I'm proud of where I'm at today. I'm proud of being a business owner. I'm proud of having this podcast and this community. But one thing that I always admire about like Nani, for example, is she has a huge, I was going to say like big and then a cuss word. She has a huge family in Oakland, California. And it's like, no matter what, like, by default that you have people you can fall back on. Where for me, it's like, I have set such healthy boundaries, like at the expense of, kind of wanting to go back to my family. Like there's a pride point for me now to even want to ask them for help.
I think where you're trying to go, or what you're saying is making me think of, is the fact that we're just raised under this like survival mindset of like, you have to do things this way or else, A, B, C, D, E.
And oh yes, thank you. Yeah. So it's a risk. Like I'm at a place where I can share with all of you that like I set really healthy boundaries with my family, but at the expense of having that disconnect, so the fear is real, it's real. It's like, that's why we try to fit in. And that's why we second guess ourselves when we do try to be independent, when we do try to chase our dreams, right? Because like I'm telling you firsthand, I do have that disconnect. Now, luckily for me, I have a very good relationship with my immediate family now. And my sister wants to reconnect with old family. And I'm in a really good place in my life where I'm open to doing that. But, that disconnect is very much still there. But I don't have regrets for the risk that I have taken to be able to, to kind of adopt my own family and to build my own community. Because hadn't I taken that risk, we all wouldn't be here today. We all wouldn't be having this conversation, talking about this podcast. I think it's a blessing and a curse, I think at the same time, but I don't have any regrets. I think what we tend to attract on our show, Nani, are orphans. A lot of us feel like orphans. A lot of us feel like black sheep in our family. Yeah. And we've kind of become that second home for orphans. And I like knowing that. I like knowing that we have sort of this common thread of like, feeling rejected by our family in a sense. I mean, not really rejected, but, probably
like
rejected.
We don't fit in.
Or, like we don't fit in and we can come together. And I think the ultimate goal though, is to not, I don't want to take you all away from your family and start a cult or something, but more importantly, to be validated that what you did was right for yourself. Man, I'm intense today, aren't I? But what you did for yourself is valid. And what we're trying to figure out as a collective is how do we go back to our family and find and coexist? Like, how do we find that balance? Because you can't stray away from family for that long. Like we can practice our independence, but, obviously, like I know a lot of our friends who have kids, they end up going back home because it helps, when you have relatives to watch the kids, for example. But yeah, I think it's just kind of beautiful that while many of us feel like orphans, we at least have a second home to, share and unload, or at least feel, be a part of the conversation by listening to our podcast so that you can take those lessons and, show up to your family or show up in the way that you want to, whether it is with family or with your adopted family.
Yeah. And I think that's what's so important about the show, and to hear trailblazers like you and like so many of the people that we've had on and share, to share your stories and your perspective, having been on that other side, for those of us who are scared to kind of go against the grain and take a step outside on the wild side, because otherwise we don't see anybody, in like mainstream media or out in society that looks like us, that is doing these things. All we see is the typical things that our families tell us: be a doctor, be a lawyer, be a nurse, etc. So it is important to highlight these stories and just say like, yeah, it is possible, like you have to reframe what you believe is possible for yourself outside of what your parents are telling you or whoever has influenced your upbringing.
Yes.
Wow, there's so much to unpack to that. But that was right. And you're right. And that was finding myself in somebody else that you to shed or put in the spotlight and showing it is possible and you're not alone is amazing. And I feel like us, especially as Filipino American women, finding that within yourself is so important, especially for the ones that are trying to figure out how to take that risk, when to take that risk. Is it okay to do it? So thank you.
Yeah. And Caroline, I want to add upon that, because I think the reason why it's hard for us to look within ourselves is because we were so conditioned not to, right? Like centuries worth, that it's not about us. It's about our family. It's about society. It's about that stupid ass Maria Clara archetype, which is so fake, by the way. She does not exist. She's a fictional character, but we live by that. Right? We live by that.
Yeah.
And so we're at a place now where we're coming together to be like, that, do you mind if I cuss? That bitch ain't real. Therefore, let's own who we really are pre-colonial times. Right? Anyway, I just want to throw that in there.
Yeah. Amen. I'm pretty sure somebody just said a fucking men, Jen. So they agree.
Thanks, Rose. Thanks, Rose. Rose is great, by the way, y'all. Okay, we all got to share our Instagrams later and I'll connect, because there's like some amazing people in this group right now, just so you know. Okay.
Perfect. And that's literally exactly why we're doing this, isn't it? So yes. I guess kind of like switching gears, as you started to notice that your listener base and your following was starting to get bigger, in terms of your podcast and your story, how did you determine where you wanted to take that next? Like you definitely have connected all of us a lot more with your newsletter, for example. I guess, how did you figure out the next step in forming this community?
Nani, do you want to share your take, or should I go first?
I mean, I think what Jen and I have always had like a really casual approach to the show. And really our mission is very simple, just to share and highlight and amplify Filipino American women's stories and, just expand the representation that's in mainstream media, like I said. And so a lot of the decisions that we've made or the directions that we've taken the show have come from the feedback that we've gotten from our guests, from our listeners, what we've seen really resonates with them. We call them love letters that we get, that people email us, these like novels of, sometimes people don't feel comfortable, like I didn't, coming on the show to share their story. So they'll do it that way. And it's really through that feedback and that input that we have guided this project and taken it in the direction that it's gone. And, all the little spin-off things that we're doing and collaborations that we've done is really just an ode to the response that we've gotten from you guys. So in that way, I feel like, again, our mission is very simple, and it's just to build community and be in community and give you that sense of like security within yourself and here with us. Jen, what do you think?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that. I just love it. Yeah. So, I mean, when this show primarily started, I had a very almost like generic reason as to why I wanted to start it. I just wanted more stories. I just wanted to hear more stories of people that look like me. That's really what it came down to. I had no idea where it was going to lead. I've been an entrepreneur for the last decade. I have a very much build as you go mentality. I'm kind of like, oh, let's see where the breadcrumbs follow us, And so it's just one thing led to the next. Like what I have come to find, and I hope that you all, if there's anything you all walk away with today, it's to understand that like there's no gatekeepers to podcasting. There's no gatekeepers to you starting a blog, to you, starting up social media, to you like sharing your story. There's no gatekeeper. There's no one holding you back. And I understand that, with colonialism, I know that we have been conditioned for permission before asking for forgiveness. But we're at a time now where it's just about failing forward. Like, it's just about showing up. Like, no one's really stopping you right now. Like, that's what I've come to learn. And part of why I stayed an entrepreneur all these years, despite like thinking I should get a job, is because like, no one is stopping me from starting my own business. No one is stopping me from selling. No one's stopping me. And I think that a lot of us, it's important to realize that. It's important to acknowledge that we have so much power in our hands today. I have a very much like build as you go approach. And I had my original objective was to document more stories. And then just like what Nani said, as we started to get more feedback, like the objective started to change. It's like, oh, people seem to like this way of storytelling. Let's go there. Oh, people seem to really resonate with the lessons that people share. Let's go there. When we first started, it was literally just about documenting stories. So I would just interview people about pretty much their life. But then when the lessons started to come in, that really started to resonate with people, and more people wanted to share their life stories. And so like what Nani mentioned, it became this snowball effect of like, okay, like this was our original objective. Now we're going to add the life lessons. Now it seems that more people are coming back, or more people are reaching out to these guests and wanting to collaborate. So we're like, well, Nani, we should collaborate, with our past guests. And so it really just evolved throughout time. And so the next step really is dependent on collectively what we want. And I think what we want is collaboration. That's really the next phase. And so, you're the first to hear it here. I mean, sort of, I think we posted this already somewhere, but, part of our approach after episode 100 is to start doing workshops such as this, where we bring on past guests which a lot of them are very much trailblazers in their industry, to share their expertise and to continue to uplift one another. But all of that, like, if you asked me if I wanted to do that on day one, I'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, I don't like, that would scare me. I think that's another thing too. Like, part of how Nani reached out to me is that I don't even remember the number of that episode. It comes up so often. I should really know this by now. But the episode that I published, I think at the very beginning, that goes something like, you don't have to have all your ducks in a row to get started. You don't. And I thought I'd share this with all of you. I heard this a couple of days ago. Someone said something really profound, which I think we all need to hear. It goes something like, perfection is a form of procrastination. I think all of us, and not all of us, I'm not pointing out you all directly, but, I think that you have to come to a point where you can't be perfect. You're not Maria Clara. She's fake. Okay. Let's remember that. She's fake. She's not real. She's not perfect. But, just understanding that, like, you can come as you are. You are more than enough. And if you come as you are, you give other people permission to come as they are. And once we're all together, we can figure out what to do from there. And that's where we're at right now, is like, hey, we're all together. We get it. We acknowledge it. We're all broken people. We don't feel like enough of anything. We all like each other though. So let's figure out what to do from here. Hence why, moving forward, we're going to be putting together these workshops. But yeah, it comes down to just being okay with being okay with being imperfect, being okay with not being enough, and showing up anyway. And that's really the next step is, Nani and I, it's like, what else can we do to continue showing up as we are?
That's amazing. And
oh, good. I'm glad that made sense.
Yeah, it definitely made sense. So that kind of is leading me into my next question is, for the podcast, how has that helped you both personally grow? And I know that when we were talking last week, Nani, you're talking about how you're kind of diving more into writing, and Jen, you love entrepreneurship. Has this helped you find more of a love for that?
And Nani, you can go first.
Yeah, no, I think Jen and I were just having this conversation offline with, I believe, Stacy Salinas from the Blue Sun Center at UC Davis again. And we were just talking about how Jen had originally went to school for journalism and never really felt like she could call herself a journalist because she didn't go to, down that traditional path of getting hired by like a big conglomerate news and media company and doing it that way. But when you look at what we're actually doing here on the podcast, sharing news, information, stories, reporting stories, basically, that's journalism. And that's what we've kind of redefined that for ourselves. For me, it's with my writing. I've always wanted to be a writer and dive more into my creative side because, like I was telling Caroline offline before we started this session, I've been an executive assistant for my entire career, basically over 10 years. And so I'm just now reaching the point to where I'm realizing like there comes a point in all of my jobs, because I've worked in all kinds of different industries for all kinds of different people and companies. And I'm just never satisfied after like a year and a half or 2 years. I'm like, okay, I'm so over this and I just can't do it anymore. And there's always some excuse that I come up with as to what's making me unhappy. But now I'm starting to realize it's me, this is just not what I want to be doing. And I keep trying to force it on myself again to have that sense of security that I've been taught to prioritize. But at the end of the day, it's not fulfilling me, and it's actually taking a really heavy toll on my mental health. And so working for, the TIFA project, I've been able to develop like this language in order to start my blog and blog about things that are relevant to the community and cultural hot topics and things that I actually enjoy talking about or writing about. I do the title and the show notes for each episode. I do the newsletter that you guys receive every week. And all of that are things that I enjoy doing and that I take on just naturally because they need to be done for the project. But then when I step back and I'm like, oh, I'm actually building my professional skills through doing this. And I'm redefining what it means. I've always been scared to say I'm a writer or to apply for a freelance writing job or a copywriting job or what have you, because I don't have any professional experience doing it. And then again, when I step back and look at, everything that I've done thus far for the show and for my blog, I'm like, oh, actually, I can say that. So yeah, it's redefining, just like Jen with her journalism, redefining the traditional sense of what that means or definition of what those titles mean and really evolving it to come into the 21st century and even podcasting itself, like some people originally thought that this was just for celebrities or influencers or people with large platforms. And like Jen said, there's literally there's no barriers to starting a podcast. Anyone can do it. And that's also what we try and highlight here is like, there's so much more possible and available to you than you may think or that you've been taught. And so, yeah, again, that's just another way that this show has really been so like beneficial to me and my life.
Yeah. That's all good to know, Nani. I love to know how much the show has like done for you. Because I was just like, oh, come on the show and let's see what happens. Like I literally, like when we were talking about like Nani's backstory, I literally just told her, I was like, just be my co-host and we'll go from there. And then here we are, nearly 100 episodes later and just how beautiful, how much it's transformed your life. It's inspiring. So, for me, so many benefits. First and foremost, on a human level, my mental health, I mentioned early on that how important community is for our mental health. And so podcasting has been my way to do that, especially during the pandemic, and also because, the power of, really what you're doing when you're telling your story and someone's listening to your story, you're validating people. Like if people hear themselves in your story, they feel less alone, And if I share my story and if I receive feedback, it makes me think, oh, like I'm not crazy. So it's really powerful. On a professional level, I am a professional podcaster. I do get paid to host another show. And it's just really been great for business. If anyone is ever, just fun tip here, if anyone is ever in business or wants to be in business and you want to study your ideal niche market or your ideal target audience, interview them, bring them on the show and say, hey, so tell me what you do. Tell me what you're into. I have another show, an award-winning show, to toot my own horn, called Holding Down the Fort. And this show is dedicated to career military families. And the thing is, so a little background on me, I was a military child for the first 10 years of my life. I lost my dad while he was on active duty. And so we became a Gold Star family, which means that you have lost a family member while they were on active duty in the military. And 20 plus years later, I had no intention of helping out the military community again until I met my husband, who's a veteran. The work that we do is primarily focused on our career military families. So being 20 years removed, though, trying to help these families, I didn't know anything. I didn't know what their needs were. I didn't know what they're looking for today. So I created a podcast to find out. It's a fun tip for y'all if you're looking to study your target audience, is interview them. But yeah, I think, on a professional level, it's just been incredible. Also, I think even outside of business building, podcasting is just so great to be a better communicator. When I first started, I still have to say my ums and ahs and stutters and stuff, but I've definitely gotten better at speaking out loud or thinking out loud, just being able to be candid like this. And so, the theme of this event is about how to cultivate your story. And I feel like I'm at a good place where I'm pretty good at telling my story. And it's not because I went to any workshop to study how to be a better storyteller. I just kept telling my story, in every conversation we had on the show, or in every opportunity Nani and I were able to talk, I shared a part of my story. And the more I shared it, just hearing myself, if you can stand to hear your voice, which eventually you will, I promise, if you listen to it enough, it's wow, that's my voice. That was already your voice to begin with. But when you hear it, you're whoa, that's my voice. But when you hear your story enough, through yourself, you start to pick up certain themes. And that itself is a form of self-healing, right, Nani? Just to be able to hear yourself tell your story over and over again. And sometimes you come to find that story you're telling yourself is actually pretty negative. You tell the story of victimhood, and you start to tell yourself, at least for me, I've learned to reframe my past. I've learned to say woe is me, a fatherless daughter, No, my dad gifted me the best thing in the world. He left behind what it's like to provide emotional support and undivided attention to people. And if he didn't leave, I probably would have never appreciated that, and I'm able to do that with every conversation I have, or I try to, at least with every conversation I have, every interview I do. I wouldn't be able to be the podcaster I am hadn't I had that kind of loss and tragedy in my life. Yeah, go ahead, Nani. That's it. I was going to stop there.
No, I was just going to add to that is that it really takes being able to see yourself in other people's stories to reframe those really traumatic things that we live with and that we carry. Because when those things happen, you lose a family member or, whatever is traumatizing you that sticks with you. And it's like a feedback loop that you play over and over and over in your head, that you tell yourself this internal story that is just beating yourself up, And so when you're able to see oh, somebody else went through this and this was their experience and this is how they interpreted it and this is how they live with it today. It's oh, I don't have to beat myself up about this. I can reframe this and look at it as, a gift or a privilege. And that's truly what healing is. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's just so special that we're able to do that and unpack all that stuff and heal together, collectively.
Community healing. So important. So I kind of
because therapy is expensive.
Right. Right.
True.
So I guess I kind of want to switch it now and throw it to everybody else that's in here. It is a workshop, so definitely interactive. So if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat. Come on camera, unmute, ask if there's anybody that wants to ask a question right now.
Because we can keep talking. Let me get I have a card game called We're Not Really Strangers.
I love that game.
Oh yeah, give me 1 second.
We just got that game too recently, and we're going to play it tomorrow. So.
Okay.
Best game ever.
Someone asked the questions before Jen brings out the details.
No, but in all seriousness, I know the topic of today is the importance of cultivating your story. And I'll just keep talking until we see a question or something, because why not? It goes back to that theme, that at least the story that I was telling myself back then, that you have to ask for permission before asking for forgiveness. And I eventually got to a place where I was like, wow, the only person that really is holding me back at this point in my adult life is myself. Yeah, I may have like my mom's voice in my head. Yeah, I may have my family's voice in my head telling me I gained weight, but that's my choice to keep those voices in my head. Right. And it's up to us to acknowledge that and realize that that's a story that maybe was given to us, but we don't have to own it. And it goes back to what we were saying is reframing it. What do we mean by reframing is, well, it's looking at the silver lining to that story. So, it's kind of like, again, I said, I talk often about the loss of my dad and what it did for me and how I grew up with abandonment issues and issues with men and not trusting men. And my husband's had a great time with that. But being able to refrain it and be like, okay, well, what did my dad's story really mean for me? And then also my relationship with the Filipino community. I mentioned early on how I was self-loathing, how I was constantly in and out of the community. And then eventually I said, enough. And I'm so glad that I went through all those experiences to be able to have a show such as the Tifa Project, to have the engaging community that we have today, where so many of you send us novels, novels of things to share, which I love. There's someone in the chat here that I'm not going to call out because she'll probably be embarrassed, but we send audio messages to each other. Like it's amazing. Actually, I owe her an audio message. You know who I'm talking to, who is listening to this. I owe this person some audio messages. I've been behind on that, but just that connection, all because, Nani and I decided to show up to share our story, as imperfect as it is. And it's like, you don't have to be perfect to get started. You just have to get started and then you get better. Not perfect. Let's just throw that word out. Perfect and failure. Let's throw those words out and just do it, right? Just do it. Just show up. Anyway.
Forward. Yeah.
Yeah. So before I pull these cards out, any questions?
We do have one question from my friend Angela. If you want to come off mute and ask.
Hi, Angela.
Oh, yeah, I just saw you like 2 days ago. Hi.
Hi. Was that 2 days ago? I thought it was yesterday. But anyway, so my question is, you guys kind of started talking about, I guess it was throughout the whole workshop. It was kind of like, having that expectation of like, oh, your family wants you to be this and that when you grow up, just so you can have that stability. But then you realize that you don't really want that for yourself. How do you kind of get over that guilt and that kind of,
guilt,
putting that self-expectation on yourself to say that this is what I want to do and I don't care what anybody else says. How do you get over that?
Oh my God. Guilt is my best friend. I am actively in therapy for that, actually. So I have couples counselor for me and my husband. We don't have problems. We're proactive about our relationship, but and I have a therapist. I have a therapist for myself. I hope you guys just enjoy like how transparent I'm sharing my life with you. But part of what I realized so I was in I'm still in couples counseling with my husband, but it got to a point where I realized I needed to do something extra like outside of him. And in talking to my therapist, I realized that like even till this day, despite all the help I've had in the last handful of years to be who I am, I still carry a lot of guilt for a lot of things. Like there's a guilt that I carry that I have not even revealed on the show yet, because that's how guilty I feel about this. And so, Angela, to answer your question, it's like, how do you work through that? Well, someone told me something really powerful back then. And again, it goes back to community, to open up to people that you feel safe enough that could understand your guilt. To say, wow, like I have that guilt too. It starts with that, because if you keep it to yourself, like it eats you up, right? But the moment you share it with someone that you feel safe with, you feel less alone. You feel, oh, okay, it's not just me going through that. So finding other people who maybe are in that same, season of their life where they want to individuate from their family, but, they feel guilty for doing it. There are plenty of people, plenty of guests, Nani, right, on our show who have gone on and said that, like said the guilt that they felt when they started to, pursue their own passion, right? And then obviously therapy is great. You can talk about that in therapy. A resource that I really like, I talk about this a lot. It's a free resource. It's not perfect, but if you're looking for, just kind of like, if you want to be anonymous on a platform to share how you're really feeling, 7 Seven Cups is a free platform where you can talk to trained listeners who are just there to actively listen to you and validate you. So Seven Cups is like one of my favorite places where I personally volunteer on and where people just listen to you. And like I said, it's not perfect. It's free. Therefore, you get what you pay for. But if you want to know more about that, feel free to reach out to me because I have some really good tips to make the most out of that platform. Anyway, that's a lot. And here's another thing too, the way that you work through guilt, and this is what I'm learning for myself because, I'm not on the other side yet. I'm in it with you in regards to having that guilt is it's like working out. Like you have to constantly work at unpacking that guilt. It's like, if you want to get toned, you can't just say, okay, I'm going to go to the gym once. I think Rena obviously knows this because we had an interview with her. Check her out on tivaproject.com. She has a business and everything. She's great. Live her up. But anyway, what I was trying to say is I'm trying to promote everyone here. I'm trying to multitask as I'm talking. You got to work at unpacking it. It's kind of like how a lot of us are actively working on deconstructing the colonization, even in our own minds and so that's what I want to encourage to you is it's something that you have to work at. You have to work at unpacking. It's something that I'm actively working on. And so I'm telling you that, that's the start of it. First of all, having that desire to want to no longer feel guilty, right? And then learning how to unpack that. It's like, if you know what you want, the how-tos actually will come easy, but you want to have that desire of like, I don't want to feel guilty anymore, and I'm going to find a way to figure that out. Does that help, Angela? Yeah. Okay, cool. I hope it did.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It's just like kind of nice to see like how other people are kind of working through it because I'm in the middle of it right now.
Yeah.
And I think also in addition to, it's a process. I think I myself am also still in it. I'm still stuck in working in corporate America and I really don't want to, but I'm also way too scared still, even having done this show and heard all these stories and being touched by so many people. And, having someone like Jen to look up to who is doing it and has been doing it, it's still scary for me. And I still haven't wanted to take that step. And so for me, the practicality piece of advice that I have for you is to pick up passion projects and start doing what you love and following your passions outside of your 9 to 5 until you can build that into some kind of momentum that you can, replace with your 9 to 5 job or whatever it is that you're stuck doing or upholding for your family. Because sometimes you have to juggle both at the same time. But like Jen was really emphasizing, it is really important to find that community that you feel safe unpacking this stuff in and constantly going back to for reassurance, because there are going to be times where you're like, oh, my family's right. I should just stay here. I should just do this. This is not as easy as, I want it to be. And so it is really important to find that community you feel safe to going for that stuff. And if you have it, nowhere else, you have it here with us at the TIFA Project. So just always knows that.
Yeah. Also think about it this way. Why do you think, people go to church every Sunday? Because during the week, they doubt their faith and they got to go back. They got to get that reassurance, right? Same thing here. It's like whatever you need to work on, it does require community. And that's something I'm sharing as I learn. Everything I need in life, like I need to be in community with. I need to find like-minded people. And so if you have that guilt, like I'm telling you, if you even just like look at a couple of our shows, there's a ton of people we've interviewed who have felt the same way. So, for starters, you're not alone. And, secondly, it's possible for you to work through that and to continue to work on it and work past that. So yeah, anyway, I hope that was helpful. Anyone else?
I think Leia has a question.
Really?
I see her hand raised on the little thing. Is that what that means?
I think Rena does.
I'm sorry, Rena. I was looking at the wrong box. Sorry.
There we go. Unmuted now. Thanks for the shout out earlier, Jen.
Yes,
I think I'm episode like 92 or 93 or something. If anybody wants to
I'll look it up. I'll give you a shout out right now as you talk.
It's in the newsletter, you guys.
Yeah.
It's not a question, but I do have a comment about, since the theme of today is cultivating and sharing your story. I read a book during like when everything with COVID started. It's called The Courage to be Disliked. And it was really helpful for me. So I have, when it comes to making a move or taking a leap, my biggest fear is fear of judgment and fear of criticism. And so this book was really pivotal because people are going to say whatever the F they want about you. You're not going to be for everyone, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. And so it does go, the psychology that is in the book. It does go a bit into, like, you don't need to let your past control you. And that in itself is a whole bunch of exercise that I'm sure a lot of us will probably have to or are actively working on. So just like, I guess, kind of a trigger warning if that is something that comes up a lot for you in your life that you've noticed. But it was a really great book for me to just kind of get over my fears of telling my story or going out for that position or that interview that I wasn't necessarily 100%, 150% qualified for. I was maybe like 95% qualified for, and just getting out of your own way and doing it anyway. So yeah, just wanted to share, and maybe hopefully that will resonate with somebody.
Yeah, I really like that.
I was just going to say, sometimes you think that you're, only 80% qualified to do something or 75% qualified to do something. And then once you're actually, if you get the actual opportunity to do it and you start actually doing the job, you're like, oh, this is, made for me. I know exactly what I'm doing. This is, I'm 100% qualified to do that. So I think that's really important to note too, is like the mindset that you have when you approach things like that.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. Here's a fun phrase for all of you. If you, let's say, have the imposter syndrome, or struggle feeling like you're, quote unquote, not enough, which, by the way, we all are enough. And we all are allowed to take space, because here's the truth. You're already taking space. Like you are space. Okay. So you might as well own it. So that's just one pep talk there for everyone. There's a phrase I like to tell myself very often that keeps me going. And it's very simple. It just goes, so far, so good. And the whole idea is, if you want to pursue something, to just go for it, and you just focus on going for it, and you just focus on working on it. And then every now and then take a moment to look back and be like, so far, so good. No one stopped me. No one told me I'm a fraud. No one told me I'm not good enough. And even if they did, I'm still going. Like, no one is literally stopping me. So far, so good. So that's a phrase that I often tell myself, and why I've just grown to be very comfortable with failing forward, because it's like, even if I fail forward, like, no one's stopping me, like no one's stopping you. And I hope that can resonate with some of you listening to this, because no one is stopping us. I mean, no one stopped us to be on this call, no one stopped us to have this conversation. And so let's focus on, or at least for me, I always focus on the things that I can control. I always focus on the things that are in front of me that I have, that I have control of. Even people that are willing to collaborate with me, those are people that I focus on, hence why Nani and I are building our community, because we want to work with people who have worked with us already or have been on our show. And we want to see what we can continue to create out of that, because we can, and we should. So we will. Anyway, that's my thoughts on that.
Do we have any other questions?
Bye, Rose. Thanks for supporting.
Hi, Rose. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
I think also in alignment with Women's History Month, I guess what I want to ask you two is, who were your female heroes growing up?
I mean, growing up, my sister, my baby sister, because she was only 5 when we lost dad. And it was really interesting. And I was 10, so you could do the math now. She's like 28 or something. But anyway, it was interesting. I don't know why I have to mention those little details, but No, it was interesting watching her grow up, because, even though we lived in the same household, we had very different experiences. Even though I wasn't like the eldest, I was the eldest daughter. And so my mom treated me a little differently than my sister, kind of her go-to punching bag and scapegoat for a lot of things. Like, my sister would stub her toe in another room, and then my mom would be like, "Why'd you do that? Why'd you do that, Jen? How dare you?" It was just like, I wasn't even in the same room as her. But anyway, that's how my mom treated me. However, she treated my sister in a very precious, delicate, loving way. In all honesty, I was glad, because of all the things that my brother and I went through. It was so inspiring to see someone like my sister that didn't have the same traumas that we had. And it inspired me to continue to do my best, to be the best version of myself, in hopes that if she does look at me, she can be like, oh, like, if Jen can do that, I could do that too. Like, I'm limitless. And, out of all of our siblings, like, she's the one who's traveled the world. She currently lives in New York. And she's just amazing, and she was also my reason for continuing on with life. It was really difficult growing up, and I could have easily had fallen victim to the things that I went through with my family, but she kept me strong. So for me, when I think about a role model growing up, I think about my sister, my baby sister, Nani.
Oh, yeah, my turn. Sorry. I was just soaking that in. I was lucky and blessed and privileged enough to grow up, like I said, with a huge family. And so I had actually a lot of females that I looked up to and that kind of were able to be there to guide me throughout my life. My mom, of course, was one of them. My grandma was like a second mom to me. She was, really heavily involved in my life and my upbringing and has really influenced, I feel like, how I am today. And then on top of that, my Auntie Sarah, who the Tifa Project has not met yet, but hopefully one day you will. She was probably the person that I looked up to most and who, like, growing up as a little girl, I just wanted to be like her. And I still can't really put my finger on what it is. She's just one of those people that, when you're around her, everything feels safe, everything feels okay. She's just like a ball of positive energy that makes you smile and laugh all the time. And at the same time, I saw her go through some, a lot of abusive dynamics with the rest of my family, similar to how Jen was describing her relationships with her closest family. I saw her be treated like that by a lot of people in our family. And so I always looked to her when I was going through things like, how did you make it through? And with such like vigor, and she's just so unapologetic. And, again, it's hard for me to like articulate what's so admirable about her. But if you were to meet her, obviously it shines through. And another woman that I really looked up to that has really helped me throughout my like older years is my best friend, Fufi, who you guys met in our Panay's on Politics episode. If you listen to that, her name is actually not Fufi. That's just what I call her. Her name is Caitlin. But she has been like another big sister to me, even though she's younger than me, and someone who has just guided me through a lot and been there to be that reassurance for me when I needed to step outside of my own family and find my own way. And I just have always been the type of person to like question myself or feel insecure about the decisions that I have to make on my own without my family's guidance. And so she's always been kind of like my rock and my support system in reassuring me that I'm doing the right thing, or that I'm following my heart, or that I'm doing something for the right reasons. And that's all that matters. So she really keeps me in check, I guess you could say. And I'm grateful to her for that. And I hope that I can do the same for her and our other friends. And then lastly, but not least, my Auntie Jen, who's here, who you've all heard talking, because she's just been such an inspiration, and she has really like changed my life, not just through the work that we do here on the podcast, but, the growth that we've had in our bond off air as well. I have a lot of step siblings because my dad likes to get married a lot, but I don't have anyone who I really feel like is a big sister to me in the way that Jen has been, and someone who I really just feel so safe around. So yeah, I'm grateful to you, and happy Women's History Month.
Thanks, Nani. Wow. That's a lot to follow up on, but I love you.
I love you too.
And thank you for that shout out.
Yes, of course.
I think it's safe to say, where would we be without women? I'm just going to say that right now. And then I think, unless anyone has any other questions, I have one last question for the two of you. And that's in terms of cultivating your story, telling your story. For everyone here today, what do you hope everyone walks away from this with?
Well, I can go first with that. I want you to tell your story. And I know that came off really aggressive, but you need to tell your story. And here's why. You can save someone's life telling your story. You could literally save someone's life. A lot of us have gone through a lot this year, and in 2020. So, there's that. And it's very, 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 very easy to feel isolated right now. And I shared a lot of that at the beginning of our conversation, of just how isolating it feels for me to be new, like fairly new in the East Coast, and still trying to, feel grounded. But you need to tell your story, because it could help people. Most of all, it could help yourself. I think we all are driven by the story we tell ourselves, or the story we automatically tell ourselves that we don't know that we're telling ourselves, or we could be, motivated by a story someone else has inputted in us that we're not acknowledging, like for a long time, even though I've been in business for a decade, there was still that feeling of like, oh, but I don't work in the government. Like my mom, she just celebrated 30 years, for a long time, I was carrying like my mom's story of what she wanted of me. Right. And so tell your story, and you don't have to tell it publicly. I know that a lot of people we've had, just like with Nani, like part of how she came on the show was she didn't want to share her story right away. She wanted to help other people share her story. But I think in doing that, Nani was able to find, tell her story in all of that. She found that motivation. But if you're looking for like kind of ways to tell your story, I'll share this in the chat. One thing I like to do is I like to record my voice. So there's a really cool app I love using. And one of my pen pals here, we use it together. So I'm not going to mention her name because I want to keep it private, but it's called otter.ai. And it's a great way to not just record your voice, but it's a free app where it transcribes for you for free. It's like AI generated. So you have about like 500 minutes a month or something to use. I pay for it just because I use it a lot, but just start talking to yourself. I know it sounds really weird, but just start talking to yourself. And Otter is a great platform to do that. Like lock yourself in a closet if you're afraid of other people hearing you because everyone's stuck at home, and just talk. And at first it's going to feel really weird. You'd be like, okay, this is my voice. Like this is really weird. Jen told me to do this. It's so awkward. Damn you, Jen, but you'll get that out of the way. And before you know it, you're going to find yourself feeling more comfortable doing that. And I encourage you to use that app because like I said, it's free. It's awesome. And plus you get if you are someone that likes to journal, you can copy all the text in there and, put it in your digital journal if you have a journal. I've been using a journal since the Xanga days. I don't know if anyone's ever been on Xanga, but that's my jam. I never got into LiveJournal. That was a competitor. We're not going there. But Xanga was my jam. And yeah, so Otter's a great way to do it and just tell it. And when you feel safe, if you find someone that makes you feel safe, share your story with them. And you don't have to tell a whole novel. You can just tell a little story. It could even be as simple as how you were feeling this week and why. It's like, hey, this is what happened today, and let me unpack why I was feeling this way. But just do it. I feel like there's so many more reasons, but I'll leave it to Nani too, to, kind of encourage, like, what are your thoughts on storytelling and why you should do it?
Yeah, no, I think that first suggestion would be to listen to the show if you haven't already, and, just get inspired by the people who have been brave enough to come on and share their stories on a public platform like a podcast. But if not, the voice notes in your iPhone or Otter AI, it can be as simple as just journaling. And you can start with just putting down what you're grateful for, which is how I started journaling. Just listing out 3 or 5 things or whatever that you're grateful for that day. And that will turn into, it will just get you thinking and get your wheels turning in order to find your authentic narrative. And then once you find it through talking to yourself, whether it just be in your head, on paper, in voice notes, recording on a podcast, whatever, then it becomes about owning your story and really being unapologetic about what it is you have to say and how you feel and what your perspective is on the world. And so I think the more courage you can find to share that with people, regardless of how you think that they're going to perceive you or interpret your story, the more therapeutic of an experience it is for you. And that's what's really important, is that healing and unpacking and decolonization, not the effect that your story has on anybody else. It's really, we do this for you and for your healing.
Yeah. And to add upon that, the only person that's going to care about you the most is yourself. Mm-hmm. Storytelling is a form of self-love. Like telling your story is a form of self-love. And it matters because when you matter, when you know inherently that you matter, it causes a ripple effect in your relationships. You encourage other people to love themselves and share their story and focus on their own, owning their own personal narrative rather than waiting for someone else to give it to them. I think it's very easy to look outward. And I know for a lot of us, especially as Filipino women, we've been conditioned to care about everyone else's stories, but ours. And what we're doing on the show is declaring that your story matters too. In fact, you need to tell your story. It's your responsibility to tell your story because, yes, everyone else's stories are important, but you will surprise yourself and everyone you love by sharing your story, and the power when you actually contribute with your story as well. Remember, this is not about asking to take up space. You're already taking space. So own it and see how that really truly benefits other people, because it will. If I didn't think that my story mattered, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. We wouldn't, because I've come to a place where I realize it's become a responsibility for, Asian women, tanned women like myself to show up. Like I have to show up because I realize there's not a lot of people that look like me, but I know that when people that look like me see me and they reach out, it's like, man, we need more of this. We need to encourage more of us to do this. So just know that there's just so many benefits to, sharing your story. And if you need more ideas, you're always welcome to reach out to Nani and I. We're pretty responsive via email more so nowadays. Instagram, on my personal Instagram, I'm pretty responsive on there, but we haven't really been active on our professional Instagram. But yeah, I don't know. It's important. I wish I can give you like a million more examples, but I feel like it's imperative. Like it's storytelling. You can't tell a story without telling it to someone. It's a way of connection. Like if you feel lonely, like just think about like, like has it ever upset you when someone that you could have helped didn't ask for your help? Like, you ever upset? You're like, man, why didn't you just ask me for help? You ever have those situations? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, do the same for yourself. It's like imagine the people that want to help you, and part of that is being honest and being open with who you are and what you're going through and telling your story. So anyway, anything else, Nani?
No, I was just going to add that there's really not a way to understand the impact that telling your story can have and how healing and therapeutic it can be until you actually do it. And again, in whatever form you feel most comfortable doing it. Again, it's hard for me to try and get across, I think, in words, what that impact feels like until you actually experience it for yourself. And so take a leap of faith,
Yeah. And remember, no one's holding you back. And because no one's holding you back other than yourself, you have to show up because you can. And so you will, you just do it. Like just show up because you can. No one's holding you back. And now I'm just a broken record at this point, but it's true. It's true. Like the only person holding you back at this point is yourself. And if you need to unpack that, whatever voices you're telling in your head, just feel free to reach out to us. Nani and I love, sharing these struggles together. And I think that sometimes we need permission through, people that look like us, right? And so if you need that permission, if you're still looking for that permission, seek it from the right people that make you feel safe, to ask that permission from. And if it's from Nani and I or not, if we're very intimidating, which I hope we're not, like I don't think we are, but if we are, find someone that you feel safe enough to ask for that permission. Say, hey, like, I really want to do this, but I'm really nervous. And I just need someone to tell me that I can do this. And sometimes that's all you need as well.
I don't know about anybody else in here, but I feel like either went to church or probably like the best therapy session I've had in the longest time. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. We're not licensed, by the way, just so you all know.
That's what that's like a therapy session.
Good thing we recorded it.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Nani and Jen, thank you so much for this on behalf of all of us, on behalf of UniPro, on behalf of so many Filipino American women. Thank you. And before we close, I'd love to throw it to Vanessa to tell everybody what we got coming up next.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming through to this workshop. Thank you again to Jen and Nani so much. I loved everything that you were saying. I felt like I could just throw myself back with like my nodding. I was just like, yes. But we have a lot of events coming up in the pipeline for UniPro. This month, we have a women leadership panel coming up at the end of the month. So stay tuned for that Eventbrite, and definitely check out our website for any other information on that or any of our social media channels. We're also in the process of working on next month. It's going to be like a big media and design month. So we have that coming up. And at the same time, too, we're collaborating with so many other different people and groups. So don't be surprised if we reach out to you. Like, honestly, like Rena, I actually recognized your name because I think your brother is Chris, and he just spoke at one of our workshops. And then Yomi Planilo also recommended you for one of our workshops. And she was just at another workshop.
Hey.
So it's just so funny because I recognized your name. I was like, I wonder if this is the same person. So, but yeah, we have so many other things coming up in the pipeline. So definitely stay tuned. But yeah, thank you again so much, everyone, for attending. And we hope to see you all again soon. And yeah, have a good day, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
So fun.
Vanessa. Have a good weekend, you guys.